how we interacted with Dexter and what he meant to us. So, here we go, if you guys are all going to shut up.
Sean asked me to be mistress of ceremonies, for which I'm very honored. And
Leslie, we love you.
I love you all. It's so great to see all of you here. And as you know, we're gathered here together to tell stories about our friend Dexter, the good, the bad, the ugly. And, Dexter left us from this plane of existence on Groundhog's Day, February 2nd, and I want to credit Alex Rice-Farr, who couldn't be here today, for this expression. Dexter left riding on the tail of a Neanderthal green comet. Yeah. Riding that comet like the John Player Norton. Yeah. And as many of you know, when you went to New Guinea Airways, you could catch the night flight to Timbuktu and you might never land. But Dexter, it was quite a ride. So I'm going to just share a brief story, and then hopefully other people will get up and tell stories, and then eventually Linnie Mae and Dexter's friends will all play music, and so let's have a good time. Sometimes someone comes along, you meet somebody in your life, and it changes the course of your life. And I think for many people in this room, Dexter was just one of those people. Over and over again, I'm hearing these stories about Dexter changed my life. My life would not have ended up the way it did were it not for Dexter. And he was one of those people for me. The biggest gift he gave to all of us was permission. He gave us permission to become ourselves and to push that becoming farther and farther out. Farther and out. How far out? How far out could we go? And it would cross, the limits of what was proper, what was right, what was
rational.
What was rational. Gravity defying, all using duct tape and tarps and come-alongs and big hammers and axes and knives and lots of cursing and lots of talk.
Always lots of cursing.
Always lots of cursing. Very colorful cursing.
His heart was pure.
But his heart was pure. And as I talk to people, I'm hearing story after story of this was who Dexter was for them. And one person remarked that we were all Dexter's art form. I mean, he could do many things. He could work in metal, he could work in wood, he could work in chickens, and he also worked in people. And I don't know if he knew this, but all of us carry Dexter with us. Amen. And my particular story is that I met Dexter in the early 70s. I was at Carleton College, and I was like just 20 or 21, and it was spring break, and so I went out to Dexter's family's farm. Dexter's brother Jim is here. Jim, you want to raise your hand? There's Jim. Yes! So, what you need to know about Dexter's family is it's like they are in the belly button of the Midwest. And you might think, it's Brother Joe. It's Brother Joe. Joe? Joe! And so they're in the belly button of the Midwest. They're like a nexus of global contacts. You want to know who to talk to figure out what to do, to figure out where to go, to figure out how to do it. You talk to someone in Dexter's family and they'll connect you, and it will be all over the world. You want to go to Alaska? They'll say, oh, I know so-and-so in Alaska. You want to go to Oregon? Oh, I have a brother in Oregon. You want to go to Nepal? Oh, yeah, my brother lives in Nepal. You want to go to Mexico? Oh, yeah. We have a house in Mexico. Anyway, it goes on and on like that, and that's who Dexter was as well. And I think you can see by the variety of people here today that he connected all of us, and many of us know each other by the connections, and we may not have known each other well at first 20 years ago, but we've gotten to know each other more. And so I said, hey, I want to move out to the West Coast, because I was going to school in the Midwest, and I'm not a Midwesterner. I'm a coastal being. And Dexter's sister said, oh, I have a brother out in Portland. And Dexter always claimed that his sister Dottie sent me as a curse. So we corresponded, and then that summer of 1975, 76, I hitchhiked out to Portland, and I landed, and that's where I landed. And I always call it the New Guinea Airways School of Zen Training. I learned a lot of things. I learned how to cook New Guinea eggs. I learned how to do body work on cars. I learned how to navigate impossible things and the situations of a lot of adversity. So Dexter's farm was a place that was really different from the cultural background I grew up in. I grew up in the East Coast, and if you can't imagine New England, and if you can imagine any place that's more different than New England, the farm was it. Especially in the mid-70s. I like to say my life was a lot like, remember that book, Even Cowgirls Get the Blues? Yeah. I think a lot of us had that experience. And Dexter, a lot of us are here in this room, he attracted a lot of young people, a lot of people who were at odds with their parents, their schools, the society, the expectations, and he gave us a place to grow. And how do you describe Dexter? He just had this kind of anarchic magic. It was like it was in his DNA. He could, He could fix anything. He could take a piece of metal and make it into something else. He could. I want to hear more of those stories because he was really quite a colorful and talented individual, along with having many, what Zoe would call dragons. Many dragons. Dark places of difficulty. And one of the cool things about Dexter was he grew up on a farm in Minnesota in the Midwest in the 40s, right? 40s. With Dexter, you always had to, what was that you said, Sean? You had an unusual relationship with the truth? You always had to, like, I always used to ask at least 3 questions of different people to try to tease out, okay, where's the true strand? But I would find these strands in among all of the other bullshit, with fabrications, fantasies.
Decorations.
Decorations. That's a good one. Any other good words? Embellishments.
Not lie. The truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah. But I would follow up on these stories, and I'd say, was that true? And as he got older, I began hearing more and more of these stories that were unconnected to things that I had heard before. For example, and you can tell me if this is true, Joe or Jim, was he a plane spotter?
No. My reputation.
He told me he used to get up on the peaks of the barn roofs and watch for planes.
That part is true.
I want to hear those stories because those are some of the best vintage Dexter. And you could tell when he was lying because his eyes would go sideways a little bit, and he'd say it in a certain tone of voice. And what do you do, right?
He would get very upset if you questioned his veracity.
Veracity challenged. Okay, anyway. So let's hear some of those stories because that's part of what we loved about Dexter. Yeah, David.
I'll do one. At least I should be sort of.
To the microphone, yes.
Okay, yeah, come on. I don't want to dominate this. I mean, I have a lifetime of these stories.
You can.
Well, this is I'm a long-time Portlander, but a short-term resident here, just a long time ago. So I'm seeing people I remember from the 70s, which there are people that are older than the 70s, but it's interesting just to keep track of things. This story has come back to me at least once recently and as an experience. And I just want to kind of try to describe it. So I'm living with my partner at that time, Teresa, and our son Zach, her son, and Dexter is being just incredibly generous. We're out there in the woods. The air is clean, and it's not dangerous particularly. There's just, and then occasionally it's incredibly entertaining because who comes down the driveway? And that was kind of the formula. If you come down the driveway at the right time, and at an obscure time, it could be a little bit of a problem. But one day he approached me after maybe early in the second year we were living there together. And he said, "David, I need some help. I need to take care of something that I just don't want to do. I don't feel good about it." And I said, well, what is it? He said, "Well, those rabbits that I've grown, they multiply." And I go, "This is a discovery. This is amazing." He says, "But I need you to help me start moving the population down. You have to kill some rabbits for me." And I thought, "Oh, that's a real..." I said, I guess I should do it because you've been such a gracious landlord that I probably need to do that. But let's do it on the weekend. So I gave a couple more days to think about it. And the weekend came, and he handed me a knife that on the other side, basically a hatchet and a knife and an axe blade. And I had that basically to work with. It was kind of getting things set up. But at a certain point in time, I now have a very primitive tool with which to kill rabbits. That isn't guaranteed unless you just are decisive and skilled to actually go off the first time or second time. So if it doesn't go off and that you've killed the animal, and even if you did kill the animal, they still can just pick up and fly off. And it's kind of like, wow, this is really challenging. And so anyway, I said, this is going to be okay. So I basically went out and found the first animal, put my hand over it, and just chopped, and bang, it was over. There was a little bit of quivering, but it wasn't like anything particularly had happened. And on the third one or the fourth one, and I'm starting to say, I'm really going to get okay at this. This could be not an income form, but at least it adds to the experience. And suddenly as I come down, what happens but that the axe and the hammerhead go flying by my face. Just insane. These are the tools Dexter gave me. He has to have great tools. He does have good tools, but not in this one particular moment. So I went to him and I said, I really am not enjoying this, but I'm trying to be a man of my word. Do you have tools that are not going to try to kill me? Oh no, that's not a problem. I've got one that's as sharp as could be. And so the next day I went up and, early enough in the morning on a Saturday or something, and he had the blade ready, and I go out and kill another rabbit, and then another rabbit, and again getting that rhythm, and then suddenly the blade just simply explodes. And I'm going into pieces, but not just tiny pieces. It just wasn't a serviceable tool anymore. And so I thought, Dexter was skilled at working on motorcycles. He was skilled at building community. He was skilled at being neighborly, and he also basically was a wild man.
Hi, I'm Gail. I met Dexter 50 years ago. I met him because I signed up as an art teacher and I lied to the administration and said I knew how to braze and how to weld. I was teaching sculpture. So in a panic, I signed up for a class at Oregon School of Arts and Crafts in downtown Portland, and my instructor was Dexter Bacon. So I ended up not only learning to braze and weld, but I became a weekend hippie up at Dexter's farm. And it was quite an experience for me. As a matter of fact, my parents were so worried about me, they sent my brothers up, one was a colonel in the Air Force, to bring me home. So my brothers just fell in love with Dexter. And they went home and they said, hey, she's okay, leave her alone. So I have a couple of stories. I brought my son. Sorry. He's 51 years old. He's not Dexter's son, okay? But he looks like Dexter. Dexter. Anyway, so we would go up on weekends, and it's interesting. I met all of these people here. I just love it. I met someone that I adopted. I signed papers, apparently. And I think this is wonderful. I did it, and I would do it again. And Jim, he and I traveled across the United States together. And Sarah, who I knew. Anyway, I was his girlfriend on the weekends. I was on Friday or Saturday night detail, but I didn't know there was a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday entourage as well. But it was fine. It was all good. You know, it was all part of the lifestyle. Sorry, Mike. So during this time when I was up there, of course, I met Zoe and Sean, and I met a vicious goat.
Solomon Grundy.
Yeah. Oh my God, that guy was better than any kind of watchdog. Would not let you by.
That was Solomon.
Solomon Grundy.
There was one in it.
There's a picture of him on the front of the house over
So I learned how to cook beets 50 different ways. I became the cook for all the visitors. And I mean, we didn't eat beets in Corvallis. I didn't even know what beets were. But anyway, I learned a lot about beets. And I also learned to ride horses down to Rock Creek Tavern. That was our Saturday night date. We'd ride the horses down to Rock Creek. I just want to share 3 things that I learned from Dexter. I'm sorry. I haven't seen Dexter in years. I learned things differently, to look at things differently. I'll get over this in a minute, okay? Anyway, I learned this styrofoam.
Let me just hold your hand.
Okay, just don't hold my notes. Thanks, Sarah. So, styrofoam wasn't just for TVs and stereos. No, it was an insulation and decor for his cabins. I mean, who would have guessed, right? It was brilliant, actually.
That was Jim Kelly.
Right, okay, I didn't know that, but, Dexter put up with it.
Parts.
Oh, that's right, okay. I'm a lot older, and so I don't remember a lot of this stuff, but, correct me if I'm wrong, thank you. And then, and who would build a studio, a dome out of car doors, where the windows would roll up and down, and you had to get to the second floor by climbing the rope. Only Dexter, right? He was actually the ugliest, sexiest man I've ever met. Just saying. So, and that's a compliment.
Right, I get it.
So,
Do it all again.
yeah, I would. So I learned to believe in myself and to tackle problems that seemed insurmountable. I was single at the time with my son, and I needed to re-roof my Victorian house. And I said, I don't have the money to do this. And he said, it's not a problem. See that grove of cedar trees down there? We're going to cut those down. We're going to make thank you. And we're going to re-roof your house. And I said, really? No way. It took us all summer. And those were the thickest pieces on that roof, and it lasted for 40 years. So, okay. So, yeah, I'm okay. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I took my classes. I was a high school art teacher, as I said, and I took my class. I was 26, and most of my classmates, my students were 17, 18, and I took them up on field trips to Dexter's because I wanted them to learn firsthand about repurposed pieces of metal, and it was amazing. They absolutely loved it. They loved it so much that many of them went into the arts. One did a whole glass ceiling in McCormick's and Schmick's. One did big installations in Neiman Marcus. I call it needless markup. So, and they loved it. And those were in the days when you could really do this kind of thing with students. I learned how to chop wood. I learned because I was only earning $600 a month as a teacher. I learned how to heat my house with a potbelly stove, which is what Dexter had. So he also used his potbelly stove for recycling. So I thought, what am I going to do with my son's diapers? I mean, this is the one that was up there with me, right? He said, oh, just throw them in the fire. They'll be fine. Just throw them in the fire. So we're down eating breakfast around that little tiny table in his, I think it was a kitchen, right?
Yes.
Anyway, we're eating breakfast, and all of a sudden, all this stuff is falling down on the table.
Oh, boy.
Oh, no.
Dexter runs upstairs, and the roof is on fire. Apparently, the Pampers caught the roof on fire. Okay, after we put it out, he went upstairs with me, and he looked up, and here's this huge hole. And he said, you know what? I have always wanted a skylight above my bed. And if any of you know that area, and I'm sure there's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday girl here, you'll know where that skylight came from. So Dexter had a huge heart. He learned about a horse that was close to our property over in Bend that was going to be taken to the slaughterhouse because it was old, you know. Dexter, who didn't have a dime to his name, rented a trailer or borrowed a trailer, drove over the mountains, picked up the horse, and paid the guy $50 for the horse and took him home. I mean, that's a huge heart. Dexter also used to take probably appropriate presents to birthday parties. We were at Bullseye Glass Company, and they were having a big birthday party for Dan, and Dexter brought a pony. I told Dan it was his date, but you know. So, to me, Dexter was a blessing. He taught me so much. To this day, he's a big part of my life. Sorry. And made me who I am. So, God bless you, Dexter.
Yeah.
And I'll be at the Rock Creek Tavern having a beer and toasting Dexter later. Thank you.
Hi. I have this 3 pages written out, but I'm not gonna read from it. Sarah, you need to come up here with me. Sarah and I met at MLC. We went to MLC together, Metropolitan Learning Center. It was a free school. And the first time I went out to the farm, it was with a class from MLC, and they were learning how to weld. And I had heard through the hallways that these people were going up to this farm where they had a dome that they were building on and welding on, and that it was made from car parts and car doors and things that still worked, just like she said. And I thought, oh my God, that sounds so cool. I gotta go and see this place. So I came up on the caravan that came up to the farm and stepped foot on that property, and the menagerie of the goats and the dogs and the cats and the chickens and the bunnies and the everything that was there, the horses, it was all, I knew in my heart that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to live there. And so, and Sarah and I made a lot of trips up there. We hitchhiked from downtown Portland, whatever. We hitchhiked all over the place, right? And Sarah and I spent a lot of time up there. Zoe and Sean, you know, we were all kids together. Demery, the Barnes kids, Beth and David, yeah, you know, Karina, all of the Skyline kids, you know.
Real kids.
Yeah, all of us kids, yeah. We were all up there, and he had all these contraptions, like a teeter-totter that went like 900 feet in the air on each side, you know, and around in circles at the same time. And at one point, he got really pissed off with the city, and because they were, I don't know, the water was going through the property and the house was sliding down the hill, and he got pissed off and he said, fuck it, I'm going off the grid. And so he built this contraption out of It was like a generator out of bicycle wheels. Hooked the horses up to it once a day, and it generated enough power to power the house and one load of wash. So, all these things, and I mean a whole lot of stories.
Mad Max, eat your heart out.
Exactly. Yes. As an artist, he was deeper than anybody I've ever met. He looked at everyone as a piece of art, and he would summon it to show its belly to the world. He would conjure the real part of that metal or that wood or that glass or that person. And he would allow it, you know, exactly what Leslie was saying. He would just allow it to be what it was and had passion for it in its own being. So what Gail was talking about, that she had actually signed papers, I decided I had been to engage with my biological father, and it ended really badly. And when I came back, I was like, I want to live up there, and I don't want to be anywhere else. And so the only way that I could do that was to legally be a foster child. And Dex was like, well, you know, he didn't like signing any kind of government papers. He was like, no.
Anybody else's kid?
No, so, but they did sit down. They said, if there's a woman that will sign with you, then we'll pass it through. So he and Gail, reluctantly, and like pulling teeth, you know, signed the paperwork, and I became the first foster child of New Guinea in every way. As a musician, from a very young age, Dexter loved that I was a music artist and nurtured that. That and the horses, the talking, you know, the communication with horses, and he always knew when I was there when we were about 12 or 13, maybe 14, 13, 14. It had to be before 14 because I was at Gail's house and got with John at 14. So, but anyway, yeah. I'm sorry, my time machine is out of whack. I need Dexter here to set the timing on it.
Well, would that be the truth?
Anyway, so I ended up going out on the road with bands for 4 decades, basically playing music all over the place. And there would be times when I felt like, where the fuck am I? You know, where's Nico? Where did she go? And it's like he innately sort of felt that and would just fucking show up out of nowhere in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, or in wherever the hell I was. He'd be standing in the doorway and I'd go, wow, that person looks familiar, and that looks like Dexter. That couldn't be Dexter, you know, but it was. And he'd come and he'd adjust my back because I have scoliosis, and he'd give you one of those bone-cracking hugs, you know, like where he lifts you up from your spine and just goes, and then he'd set me back so that I could get back up on my horses and be who I am, you know, again, and be able to go out in front of audiences and perform and all of that. And he'd just be there as long as I needed him there, and then as soon as I was okay, he'd be back here at the farm. He always told me I have a home to come home to. Always. And that meant so much. So many more things. Oh, Sarah and I, we took a bath in the bathtub there. He had this decoupage. Well, I had to tell the story because it's funny as hell. I still sport the brand. So we get out of the tub and we'd be naked, standing in front of the wood Superior wood stove and warming our butts. And we both got a little bit too close and branded our asses on that stove.
Have all of the D and half of the O.
Yikes.
And I have the W. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. Alrighty, I sense the crowd is restless, so let's have some short stories and have people come who want to tell this and that and keep going.
All right.
One short story.
Come on up.
Can I tell mine first?
There, baby.
Okay. I'm getting over cold, so that's why I'm wearing a mask. Didn't want to share it, but I'm going to take it down while I'm up here. Jennifer Jenkins, Glowacki, grew up here on the hill. Remember Gail? God, I just fell in love with her. You know, she had long red hair. Leslie, you know, so many of you. One of my first. Mine might be a little bit longer, but I remember like Sean and Zoe and me scrabbling under the house, Dexter's house in '69. Zoe must have been, what, 2? You were like 5. I was 7, say 8, I don't know. Anyway, we're all muddy. And the house was lifted. And, you know, Dexter was going to make it amazing down there. And he got started, you know. Right? I mean, the dome, the swing, out over the creek, all the cool cabins, and I dated a really beautiful boy in the 70s who lived in that cabin that later became Zoe's place. But I remember a night being up there and the snow and the moon. Oh my God! Anyway, it was beautiful. And it was an inviting place. And in 1969, when I was just a little kid, I thought it was fantastic. I want to grow up and be a hippie. Anyway. But Dexter did 2 things that I guess have sunk into me. He provided, I'm not sure what the right word is, fodder, maybe. His mind, as you know, he was brilliant, and he loved nothing more than a good debate. And me, with my nubile 15-year-old brain, I loved a good debate, you know. So we would get into it, and it was fun, and I loved it. And I don't remember any specifics, you know, but he was fun to debate with, you know, and just accepting that and encouraging that in me, and not being afraid of having a smart woman or girl around and encouraging that. There were a lot of parties, with a little bit of beer and a lot of marijuana in that barn, which I think finally fell down. Did it bite the ghost?
Yes.
It did, yeah.
The big snow.
Yeah, well, it was about time. And the other thing is when I was a kid, a poor kid with my first car, I was probably, 19 or 20, he and George, maybe wearing clothes, maybe not, maybe George, I don't know, can't remember.
Wasn't wearing clothes.
Probably not. But this was back when George lived up on the hill where Jimmy Boyer ended up, and Dave Reich and Lynn May. But I'd take my car, get over there, and Dexter would come, George would be there, and they'd be working on my car. and Dexter would be like, no problem, we got this. It's not going to take very long. And George would be like, I don't know, Dexter. This isn't looking good. Yeah, but they always got it fixed, and I went off and, rode away into the sunset with the clunkers. Anyway, lots of good memories, and many of you are part of that, and thank you for being here.
Yeah.
You guys want to hear from you guys.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
I'm Jim. I'm Dexter's middle brother. The younger one's out here too. Our sister couldn't make it. She's gotten a little frail, but she used so much energy harassing brother Dexter that's really what made him who he was. He had an axe very much like that, a little cruiser axe, and one day after Sister Dorothy harassed him to the point where he was raging, we were both deadly afraid that he would kill us, and we headed up to the barn and slammed the big front barn door shut. And Dorothy wedged his axe between the door and one of the studs. And Dexter was up there. He came up, he braced his feet on the doorway, and he was pulling on that handle, and we watched the axe flexing. And in a sweet little voice, she said, "Dexter, if you pull any harder, you're going to break your own axe." And Dexter exploded, and he pulled that sucker, and the axe went flying, and we went flying out the back door of the barn, which was about 10 feet above the manure pile. And by the time Dex figured out where we'd gone, we were hell and gone back in the woods. But really, it was my sister Dorothy who knew exactly which things to trigger Dex by doing. He spent many hours making balsa wood and paper models of airplanes. And one day she got in his room because he had securely locked the padlock he kept on his bedroom door to keep her out. And she glued all his models to each other. Sweet sister of ours. Everybody loved her except Dex, and the rest of us had seen what she could do to people. And so that axe picture is a great one to remind one of the days when, you know, the first things I remember, I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and Dex had a lot of responsibility because our parents worked full-time, and we always had livestock. We had chickens and cows and pigs, and the pigs were always good at getting through fences. And so he ended up with a lot of the responsibility for keeping the place together. And then when he was 14, our dad died, and so then he really had to buckle down and get a lot of stuff done. And so I have a lot of respect for who he became, and I do miss him. I was out last summer, and he hadn't changed a lot in 50 years.
I'll try to tell you some things about Dexter that you don't know. Jim mentioned losing our dad. It was very tragic. Our dad had a big fight, told us kids if we didn't work harder doing the chores on his farm, we were going to kill him. Then he went to bed and died. Dexter was 14, and so it was tough. I'm not a crybaby, but I cry at funerals, especially or memorials about my brother. But Dexter was an Eagle Scout. He was one of the most generous people you could ever meet, as you all, many of you experienced this. When I was little, he made me a covered wagon out of wood with the full canvas top, and I was like 5 years old. I wanted to play with it, and he kept saying, "No, you can't play with it. You can only look at it or it will break. But if it breaks, I will fix you." My father was a perfectionist. He'd grown up very wealthy, the son of a very wealthy orthodontist in the Twin Cities. And every summer, he was an only child, every summer he went to his grandparents and stayed at their farms, right near where Leslie Toes went to school, right by Carlton. And that's what my dad wanted to do. His parents wanted him to be an opera singer. In 1936, the absolute worst year to begin farming, my parents bought a farm. My dad was working for my uncle as a realtor, my great uncle. And so Dexter grew up on that farm with a father who didn't understand the kids weren't perfect and who expected perfection. My father was like Dexter, unlike me. My father could fix anything. He was famous for stories. My daughter Hannah, who is now a professor at LSU and 40 years old, when she was about this big, Dexter came to a bat mitzvah. I converted to Judaism, so my kids had bat and bar mitzvahs. He came all the way to Wisconsin, which is a big deal for him, and left his farm. And he was telling stories. And later Hannah said to me, Dad, I don't think those stories were all true. and I said, Hannah, they're stories. Stories don't have to be true. Click and Clack said, those of you who are sticklers for the truth should get your own show. We're not Click and Clack, our local radio. Okay, so I want to just tell a couple of other things that Dexter that Jim didn't mention. First of all, Jim was, I worship Jim. Dexter was gone when I'm 10 years younger. I'm the baby. We had a younger sister who died when she was 12, but she was institutionalized. So I was effectively the baby. My mom was the opposite of my dad. She's raised 4 kids, including Karen Loman's, her younger brother, Clarence's dad. And she didn't expect kids to be perfect at all. When she married my father, who was divorced, smoked cigarettes, and told off-color jokes, her parents said, and he wasn't Lutheran, if you married this guy, we're never going to give you a nickel. And they watched my parents through the Depression and the war just work like dogs. Like Dexter, my dad had a terrible temper. And so, we were a little bit afraid of him. One time he bit Dottie. And Dottie Dottie was Dexter's dad, our dad, James Evans Bacon. My same name as my brother. Dottie had bite marks on her. Dexter was 2 or 3 years older than that. Dottie was a little angel, who was not an angel, but who my father thought was an angel, showed those bite marks to my dad. My dad put Dexter on the ground, took a pliers, said, if you ever bite anybody again, I'm going to pull every one of your teeth. And Dottie was terrified that he would bite her, and then she'd have a brother with no teeth. So, I'll try not to take too long. I just, I worship Dexter because he was everything I wasn't. What Jim and Dexter spent their whole high school years doing is working on old cars, rarely driving them. Dexter had a 40 Ford Coupe, which he completely restored and took off to Antioch. I also went to Antioch because Dexter went there, and I didn't really like school, and the idea of only going to school half-time seemed wonderful. Unlike Dexter, I could spell and I could do grammar, so I didn't flunk out. Dexter first went to vet school. He wanted to be a vet. He loved animals. My mom told me the only time she ever saw my dad cry was when one of his 2-horse team died, fell in a trench and died in the trench. And my dad couldn't get that horse out. He sat down on the running board of our car and cried. and Dexter didn't cry a lot either, but he was like that with animals. He couldn't deal with things dying. When our dad died, Saturday night or early Sunday morning, I have a terrific memory. I remember the hearse. I remember my dad lying in bed dead, I wanted to get his ring off. And I remember the coffin at my dad's funeral. And Dexter suddenly at 14 had to become the man of the family. And my mom was German. She grew up speaking German until they sunk the Lusitania in Minneapolis, and then people spit on her. It's a very good way to learn English in a hell of a hurry. She always spoke German with her parents so they wouldn't know what we were talking about. But anyway, so, she loved my dad, but she sort of tried to modify his behavior and calm him down when he got very angry. But, she never thought anybody this good looking would marry her. My dad was pretty good looking. One more Dexter story, though. 2 Dexter stories. The first story is if you had seen Dexter's room, which was the smallest bedroom in our house, you would understand Dexter's farm. Dexter's room had a little roll-away bed that you could fold up, and it had the attic stairs to the upstairs of our 4-square house. And he had every Boy's Life, every Popular Mechanics, and every Mechanics Illustrated, Popular Science, whatever, every issue, which is what he spent his money, his paper out money on, and there was this little bitty path to his bed. And he kept the lock on the door, and Jim and Dottie figured out ways to get in. One time they put a ladder up to the window, crawled in the window and did stuff, and then went down. But Dexter was very small. When he was 15 and got his driver's license, first time he took the test, it was a blizzard in Minnesota and he failed. But he had to sit on a pillow. He stood well over 5 feet, like maybe 5'1". He didn't grow till he was 16, which was hard. You know, he could still sing very high notes in choir. But we would build hay forts in our barn. We kept animals. Dexter was a very good animal husbandry person. He took excellent care of the animals because that was very important to my dad. After my dad died, anytime Dexter didn't agree what we were doing, he would yell at us, if Dad was alive, this would never happen, right? So Jim and I'm 10 years younger, so Dexter was pretty much out of my life to Antioch when I was 8 years old. He's 18, he's gone. But Jim and I would build hay forts, and we got more and more ingenious because Dexter thought that we were destroying the hay quality. So we once made a hay fort where you could go out an open window in our barn and reach around and go into the hay fort. So there was no door to discover. And we would put boards up and make big rooms, probably why we have hay fever now. but there was one time that Dexter heard us in there. We made a hay fort where it had a tunnel entrance with a little fake hay bale with string around it, which Jim designed. And we were in there, and Dexter could hear us. And so he was up in the haystack trying to figure out where we were, because the whole barn, one half of it was full of hay. And all of a sudden, he disappeared through the roof of our hay fort through one of the cracks. And of course, we bailed out the tunnel, and all you could hear was Dexter screaming that he would kill us when he got us. One more, it's a good story. Dex would get mad at Jim pretty rarely, and very rarely at me, because I'm a little kid. Dexter made a goat cart from me from the back, the shafts of a chair that my mother got from her sister, a Danish modern chair, and the back seat was padded. He put wheels and axle on that, used the shafts to tie to the goat I had, made a harness. And we were surrounded by the Daytons and the Pillsburys, and we were poor, and I was the envy of every kid. Every kid in the neighborhood. And we had a 4-square house, which was great for chasing. When my dad was alive, when we started chasing, he would sit down on the stairs, put his leg out, and as every kid came by, he would whap! And then he would wait for the next chasing kid. And it was, I was too little to chase. One time, Dottie was a perfectionist, and always telling you what you should do, my sister. And she was lecturing me about eating all my food. Now, my dad died when I was 4 years, 1 month old. Any memory I have of Christmas or summer, I'm 3 years old. So I'm in this high chair, and Daddy's saying, you gotta eat all that, you're not eating ice cream. You don't eat any of that, you eat that spinach, you gotta eat the roommate, you don't get any ice cream. And I was so pissed off, I took a fork and threw it at her as hard as I could, which, I was not a perfect child. If Jim was telling you stories, there'd be a lot about me. My dad got up, picked me out of the high chair, whack, set me back down. It was the only time that I ever got spanked. My mom was not a spanker. After my dad died, we had a family meeting, and my mom was a social worker. She made $3,500 a year, and she worked to keep this so we could afford losing all the money on the farm. And my dad was always getting a job and then either quitting in anger or just getting fired because he got mad. But he was very good at many things. Anyway, they were chasing around the house. Dexter was trying to catch Jim, and was it a knitting needle or a fork? What did he threw something. A knitting needle. And it stuck in the door, right where Jim's head had been. So if it had hit Jim, we might not be here tonight. And then one other thing, another time, they were going round and round and round, and Jim saw a brownie camera with a flash bulb in it. And Jim was very quick and very small also for his age. As Dexter was chasing him around and around this 4-square house, Jim had time to turn around and take a picture. So we have a picture of Dexter going, thank you all for coming. I'm sure there are many, many more people whose life was changed by Dexter through scouts, through helping their animals, for giving them things that they needed, and for whatever reason they're here tonight, but I thank you all for coming. We were all somewhat changed and somewhat enriched by knowing my brother. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cindy Roach, and I still live about a tenth of a mile down from Dexter's. I've known Dexter for way over 50 years, and I could be here all day telling stories, as many of you could. The summer solstice, the winter solstice, all that. And I'll tell you one thing that was pretty funny that he did for my dad. Pardon?
It's okay.
You can sit one day. There you go. Okay. There you go. All right. After the Vietnam War, my dad was mailman, and he had to hand deliver mail to Dexter's. And he went down there, and Dexter, with much more women on the roof than him, they were all naked on the roof, fixing the roof. And my dad enjoyed delivering the mail there. As a matter of fact, my dad found excuses to hand deliver a number of pieces of mail after that. And it was so funny because if you can imagine, his house is quite tall to get up there at the roof. They're naked, he's on the ground, and maybe they're on a ladder. Bean! And he definitely gave my dad stories to tell at the dinner table on a few occasions for that. And that's just, you know, it was back in the days in the early 70s when it was the hippies and everybody's naked and having a good time, but my dad wouldn't do anything that, it's un-army-like. So he really had some stories to tell after delivering mail to Dexter's.
Just a real short one. I'm one of the ex-son-in-laws. Jeff, I married Sean. We were together for a long time. I think every decade got a little bit of a different Dexter. There was a 60s Dexter, a 70s Dexter. I got the 80s Dexter. Sean and I hadn't been together for very long, and we got a call one night, late at night, and it was Dexter, and he was like, I'm house sitting for a drug dealer. He's got a Porsche and a BMW. You want to come drive him? I was like 23 years old. I was like, I'll be right there. So Sean and I go out on the Skyline, and Dexter takes us into the garage, and there's a brand new Porsche 944 and a BMW something or another, and we spend, I think the call was like probably 10 or 11 at night, and we were out there at midnight driving these cars that belonged to somebody else, and it was the first time I ever got to drive a fancy car, and thanks Dexter for that. Yeah, so that was it.
Glad to be here. David Solat, student from Metropolitan Learning Center of Dexter, and spent some time on the Ridge. Drove up here from Berkeley, California with my wife Julie. And just want to read a tribute poem for Dexter.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
It's called A Note of Appreciation to Dexter Bacon. And it's got a call and response part. So when I say New Guinea Airways, can you say we never land? Let's practice. New Guinea Airways. We never land. Grab handles of worn wood and metal boxes. Some held closed with added leather straps, old suitcases and containers full of art, tools, and supplies. I'd meet you in the parking lot to unload and carry downstairs to Betty Mather's B1 art-based art room at Metropolitan Learning Center. We were high school students sorting out who we were and what to do in the world. You showed us how to use tools, work with metal to create jewelry, art, how to work with our hands, relate and fit together the things around us. After the weekly workshop, gather up tools and supplies, carry the sacred objects back up and load into vehicle. You would head back to the hills. New Guinea Airways. We never land. The rebel pop artist Karita Kent explains that to create means to relate. The root meaning of art, of the word art, is to fit together, and we all do this every day. Each time we fit things together, we are creating, whether a loaf of bread, a child, or a day. New Guinea Airways. We never land. Dexter Bacon, you are so many things to so many people. Artist, master craftsman, teacher, mentor, implausible character in a psychedelic-inspired Tom Robbins novel. Now, the forests we're surrounded with, we know, are interconnected through underground mycelium fungus networks, facilitated by hub trees that provide key information and nourishment. Dexter, you are a hub tree. Everyday practitioner of mutual aid, a mechanic and repair station in a broken down world. You could make anything from anything and fabricate the missing part. New Guinea Airways? We never land! 45 years ago, I would bike in drizzle up Skyline to Rock Creek Road to work with you as teacher, mentor, friend, making a knife from old saw blade, baling hay for old Scottish farmer Dick Campbell, staying up all night to dig a grave for the beloved horse Babe with regular smoke breaks.
We never land.
New Guinea Airways. Beautiful wooded land sloping to creek is a sanctuary, a partial parallel universe of mutual aid without politicians, cops, bosses, or generals. The world's largest multimedia moss-covered found object assembly sculpture. New Guinea Airways. And I've spent a lot of my adult life now carrying containers of tools and art supplies, setting up workshops, teaching art, making to protect communities and land, to shut down the WTO in Seattle in '99, to support farm workers, justice for striking teachers and McDonald's workers, to stop a pipeline at Standing Rock. Inspired by your brilliance, generosity, strong heart, and practice for a revolution of the heart, New Guinea Airways. We never land. Thank you.
The whole thing was an art assembly. I'll try to keep this short. So I'm Dex's cousin, Karen Lohman, and my dad and his mother were siblings 10 years apart. So I lived with Dex and Lenny when I was about 13 and 14 and helped with Sean and Zoe. The first time was at Battle Creek. They had a big farm, had lots of concerts, be-ins. I remember Lenny starting the Cuckoo's Nest in downtown Portland when they lived at Lake Oswego. I was there one summer. But what I'm remembering now is when I went to Evergreen, my second year, I was in an environmental design class building a bathhouse off of my garage with 5 other students, and we needed a bath. And I called up Dexter and I just said, "You have any cedar?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I got some old growth, come on down, we'll break it out, we'll make you a tub." And a group of 4 or 5 of us, we drove down there. We walked out into the woods. We found half-buried piece of cedar, I don't even remember how we dragged it up to Dex's place, but we...
Probably with a motorcycle.
Yeah, probably, or a horse. And, you know, it was the first time I learned how to use a froe. And we broke out the staves. We built a tub that was really about that deep, Japanese inspired, out of the cedar. And it worked for about 10 years. It was wood fired. With Dexter, it was like many of you say, you can do anything. He was incredibly generous, and those years changed my life.
So awesome to see you all here, those people who love Dexter. I guess I have a short story too, but it was inspired by, you know, that he could fix anything or could do anything, and I just wanted to tell a really quick story. So I lived actually in the cabin that Zoe lived in for maybe 4 or 5 years, and I was just like so grateful to him. He was so good to me, and I was going through a terror, like so many of us, a very crazy period of my life, and you know, he just Dexter is crazy, grounded me in the best way. It was so good. But one time after I moved out, and still definitely kept in touch with him. And this is a Zoe story too, and I'm so happy to be thinking and remembering Zoe too at this time. We decided we had to have a hoop in our neighborhood, and we moved into a neighborhood that was predominantly at one point in time almost all, you know, African American, black, and here, you know, other people were moving in like us, gentrifying. We got a big house in the Ainsworth and blank, 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 and lived there, but we really wanted to put a hoop up in front of our house on the street. In fact, our neighbors were, you know, black kids and stuff like that, and we thought, we're going to put up this hoop. So we put it up, and you know what? Really, people who get into basketball, like I bet some of you do, you know how you like to jump up and hang on that hoop? Well, that hoop lasted that we put up there. We thought it was really good, and we did a good job. It lasted like 2 weeks. And I called Dexter up, and I said, Dexter, you're the only one I can think of who could actually fix this. I mean, we have a hoop, and we like, what are we gonna do? And he goes, and Zoe also was living with him in the house at the time, and Zoe and I are gonna come out and fix it. And so they came out, and they brought beds, things with them from he found on his. He had everything, as you all know. And so they were like, it turns out that those frames of beds are some of the strongest kinds of metal that you can possibly use. And so he took them, and he and Zoe welded them onto the basketball hoop. And you know what? It was years before it broke again. And so, you know, like, but it was so sweet, you know, that the two of them came out and they spent the afternoon like fixing up and welding on these bed things to the hoop there. So just wanted to share that. He could do anything.
I just want to tell one quick story before I forget. Jim reminded me of the best story ever, and I want to tell you. We used to play hide and seek in our farmhouse. Our mother was always working, so we were pretty much wild children, unsupervised. We'd probably be in foster care now. Anyway, maybe some other people crazy. We were playing hide and seek, and we couldn't find Dexter. And suddenly Dottie came and said, or Jim, I don't know if Jim or Dottie, not me, found Dexter in our electric dryer. Dottie goes, shh.
Oh, God.
Chunk! Dexter is now, imagine how small he was. He was probably in 10th grade and weighed 98 pounds. But he started screaming and yelling, and then Dottie turned on the dryer. But she turned it off very quickly, so he probably didn't make a full revolution. But we made him stay in there until he promised that he wouldn't kill us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather, and I met Dexter in the later years through his daughter Zoe. Representing Dexter's shirt.
Step up.
Step up. That better?
Yeah.
Thank you. Quiet in the back. All I can say is that I was fascinated by this man before I ever met him. with all these stories, and I'm like, who's this Dexter guy? You know, Zoe and Ellen would be coming over to my house after they're done blowing glass, and oh, Dexter did this, and I'm like, who is this Dexter? You know, finally meet him. And charming as he is, kept me charmed every minute I spent with this man, and blessed. And I went out there and I was telling him one day, I was building this like little shack, and I wanted some wood shingles. He's like, what do you mean? And I said, yeah. I go, do you know where I can get some wood shingles? I want to do the, you know, the little things, like I don't know, I had to draw a picture because I'm not articulate or mechanical. And he corrected me, he said, oh, you mean shakes, Heather. Those are wood shakes. I'm like, okay. And he's like, you come on out here. And I'm like, all right. He goes, I think I got something for you. He's like, we're out walking the land, and he's like, well, I go, it seems like it's really hard. He's like, oh, no. You just need to throw in a melon. I'm like, okay. And I was like, okay, whatever. And he's like, you know what a fro is, don't you? And I just looked at him because I did not know what a fro was. And I said, Dexter, when you say fro, I think in 1970s afro. You know, I had no idea. He had to correct me. He showed me super easy. And he had like 4 bolts. Showed me how to split a micro and my mallet and still have it. And among more stories. But another thing I've been doing for a long time, and I did this for Zoe, because, you know, they had a complicated relationship at times. And so for years I would record conversations on my phone with me and Dexter. And the reason why my voicemail is always full is because I have a lot of voicemails from him calling me. And so I just randomly went out there. I was like, all right, I'm gonna find one. Thank you. Can you just say play? This is a good one though, okay? This does it all for me. Oh, you better play. Could they be joking? Oh. No, I'm gonna put it on speaker. Wait, we gotta start from the beginning? Yeah, Dexter, I get it, 'cause, we both hate technology. There we go. Okay. Wait. Pause this.
And you know, get it. Hold it up to the microphone.
Oh, now I'm calling him.
No.
Since December 25th. It's so funny though, but maybe it's not meant to be. It's right here, December 25th.
October 24th.
One more, hang on.
Oh, yeah.
This one, this is it. Yeah, that's what I want. Okay.
On the road again, I gotta get back on the road again. It's been so long since I went. I gotta get on the road again.
Anyway,
That was
Dexter.
beautiful.
That was.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dave Lohman. You heard from my sister earlier.
Hey, Dave.
Most of my memories are about Lake Riley at the Bacon house. And I think some of my creativity to learn how to weld, to work on cars, pottery, all came from Dexter and his family. I can tell you a story about, I learned how to water ski on Lake Riley. And we were out, I can't remember if it was Dexter or Joe or Jim, and we were out on the boat and my sister was on the end of the rope. And she hadn't learned to ski very well, but they were trying to teach her. And we started doing S-turns. And I said to him, she's not going to learn to ski very well if you keep doing that. You got to go straight. And they go, oh no, we're trying to get her top to fall off. Just like Dottie. And they did. And then the other interesting part was we'd go out there and they talked about Dottie, and she used to torment all of the brothers. And one of them was, she tormented me too, because they used to have a screen porch. And I'd go to sleep on the little bed out the screen porch up above the lake. and she'd come by and she'd either grab your hair under your arms and pull it, or your nipples and she'd twist them. She was that kind of girl. But, I remember the one car that I was very interested. I became a mechanic. I was a mechanic for 50 years, so they influenced me a lot. And they had a race car that they were building, was all aluminum or stainless. And to this day, I was influenced by that. But great person.
Hi, I'm David Greiner, and I grew up on Skyline up above Dexter's, and for some reason, my parents, they kind of had the proper house on the hill, and they tried to keep everything looking nice on the outside, even though it was pretty crunchy on the inside. But my dad was a teacher at Cal and Gable, so my fellow students were all Cal and Gableites, and the kind of the upper echelons of Portland and liberal culture. And for some reason, they weren't allowed at the farm, but it was fine for me to go hang out at Dexter's, which I just loved. I mean, it was like the world, everything I was interested in was there. And he taught me to weld and how to shoot guns and race cars and do all sorts of crazy things. And I mean, just so many epics, and it felt like, well, let's see, how many ways did I almost die with Dexter? In the back of a Camaro with a toolbox flying around, because we had to get to, some movie on time. Or, there was a weather balloon my brother got. It was a very large weather balloon. And, he thought, we should fill this up with some acetylene. Just the person to do that with. And, there was a long piece of dynamite fuse between the balloon and it was kind of boring waiting. And I was looking at my brother and Dexter and Gordon. And there was this blinding flash, and it felt like my face was just slapped, so hard. And this image burned into my retina of people flying sideways, and the gravel going off of the road over our heads, and wow, that was really something. We, listened to the echo of rumbling off of the hills and the clouds like a clap of thunder. And the ringing in my head, and I know, okay, we run down to the house, and the phone is ringing. And Dexter picks it up and says, an explosion? What? That's funny, I don't know what you mean. Hangs it back up, and the phone is ringing again. He says, oh no, I don't know who it was. Somebody in the neighborhood. Your windows? We were out the back door. It's so lovely to see everyone here.
It's lovely to see you.
Yes.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah. So I'm only going to tell one story about Dexter because I probably have 100. He spent every Thanksgiving with us for many years. He worked for me at the barn, and you'd always hear him going, whoa, Mom! Easy, easy, easy. But I have been told that Dexter really loved Courvoisier. So we have 4 bottles of Courvoisier. I'm going to be walking around and passing them to people. Oh, shoot. I guess I better drink it. But do not drink it until we get up here and Sean can make a toast to her dad.
Nice.
So now the only story I'm going to tell is a story that Dexter doesn't know about. So I don't believe in God, so chances are he can't hear me. But he had a dog named Apex, and he had way too many puppies. And Lynn took Dexter to Thailand for a trip, and while he was gone, we found homes for puppies, etc. And he thought Apex was the most wonderful dog in the world. And as most of you males know, you're not into castration. So while he was gone, I took the dog to the vet. And the vet did an vasectomy on the dog. The dog still had balls. Still acted like a male dog. But he couldn't get anybody pregnant. So for years, Dexter would say, "Oh, Corinne, look at these wonderful puppies that Apex just had." And I would smile and go, "Yeah, they're really nice, Dexter." So we will be passing this around. Well, as people talk, I'm going to walk around and we're going to pass this around. Do not drink it until you're told. Because otherwise the wrath of Corinne will come down on you.
There we go. Technical falsies. Now that's
Hi there, I'm Zeph. I knew Dexter in the 80s and 90s. My introduction to Dexter was going over with my father, George, who many of you know, on his truck. And I'm not really sure what we did over there most of the time. There was usually lots of like yelling and rummaging through like one of 1,054 cars that were over there, which translated later when I was about, oh, I don't know, 15 or driving age, 16. And speaking on Dexter's generosity, he hooked me up with this, I think it was a 1976 Dodge Omni. And he really sold me on it. I mean, and I think I just liked how it looked. But the transaxle was sitting in the passenger seat, and it needed some work. And somehow my folks lived about a quarter mile up the road at that time, and somehow maybe we had it towed or got up to my folks' place. As you know, my father's a mechanic, and he took one look at that thing. He said, "It's going straight back to Dexter." You didn't want anything to do with that. I remember that. And yeah, so, and then another great memory was as a Hill kid, we'd go over there and have fun and do some extracurricular activities. And one evening, Dexter hosted a drum making workshop, and we had these hollowed out tree stems, trunks, and I had some rawhide and made these hand drums, and that was really nice. It was like outdoor school that he had at his place for his kids in a very interesting way. Yeah, so that's, yeah, miss you, Dexter. Thank you for the memories.
You go for it, girl.
Okay, last one. My name's Kathleen Newman. This is more of a thank you. August 1st, 1992, we got married on Dexter's property in his corral. Thank you.
All right, does everyone have a small glass? Okay, so I would just like to say, since everyone received from Dexter in one way or another, and, you know, blessings, and also was there for Dexter and listened to his stories, which he loved, I would say let's pass on the creativity and the training and the learning and you know, whatever that was, whatever that spark is that it got in you, and continue giving that to each other or to the next person down the line, because obviously he gave a lot and touched many, many lives. We love you, Dexter. Continue up into the ether. Love you. Dexter!
My name is Mary. I live 6/10 of a mile from Dexter for a good portion of my life. One of my favorite things about Dexter was his creativity and swearing. I would be walking by the property with my dogs. I'd hear him out there with these chainsaws. Something would jam and words would float up out of the house. And you would just stand there and listen in awe, because it really was awesome. I love to swear, and Man, I wish I was that good. Dexter's goats. He had one named Spunky. There was Solomon, but then there was Spunky. Spunky was...
Spunky dildo rock blossoms.
There you go. I wanted nothing more than to see that goat on a spit. He got between me, I had a horse in front of me and a friend, and the gate behind me, and I boosted the girl up onto the horse, and that goat was raking me across the thighs with his horns, and all I could do was yell, "Dexter, do something about your fucking goat!" And out of the barn I could hear Dexter, who had that wonderful, wonderful deep bass voice, and I heard, "Goat!" And the goat stopped what it was doing. He had a slingshot with ball bearings that he would use to nail this goat because that goat was out of control. Thank you. I will miss Dexter.
Just like to say real quick that if anybody's missing Solomon, his head is still in Dexter's living room.
Real quickie about cars. So Dexter at one point he goes, "What's your dream car?" And at the time I was like, "I love muscle cars." And he said, "Oh, good, muscle car." It's like, "What is it?" And I was like, "I like a 65 Mustang, with pony seats," and I just made it all really elaborate and everything. So I was out on the road, and I got this letter finally. It had probably 20 different addresses for this letter to try to catch up with me because we were always going from town to town. And I got this letter, and there's a picture of him in front of this white Mustang on the side of it, and he goes, "How about this? Will this do?" It was a 68 Shelby Mustang Fastback. And he goes, "Isn't that better than a 65? Everybody has a 65. Not very many people have this kind." So I was like, "Yeah, okay." And he goes, "Well, the only problem," I called him right away, and I go, yeah, that's a great car, It's like, and he goes, "The only problem is, it was owned by Shelby. It was gifted to Shelby's grandson, who was told that he could not do any street racing in any town anywhere." And the grandson said, and came up here to Portland, was street racing it, and got T-boned on the driver's side. And his punishment for doing the street racing was that he had to give the car over to the wrecking yard. Which Dexter had a friend who was at the wrecking yard. I don't know who that guy was, but he ended up paying $300 for the car. The T-bone place was wrinkled, right in the well, kind of on the side there, right behind the door. It was all wrinkled and crunched in there. And he goes, "The deal is, you get the car, but you got to help me come in and punch that crinkle out, right?" And so I was like, "Okay, I think kind of what you do, you just screw in there and then pull it out, and screw in and pull it out." And no, we're not doing that. We're going to keep it completely intact. So we had this wrinkle, and I mean, it was squished. The door well was kind of scrunched in and everything. And I got home, and I only had a couple of days off, and he hands me a mallet and a thing, and he goes, "Have at it." He goes, "You got to do this. If you're going to have this car, you got to do it." And I spent about 10 minutes out there, and I'm going, "God, Dexter, the pounding is ringing in my ears." He goes, "Give me that." He took it. He made that door perfect. Just pounding it out from the inside. He took the inside part off and just was like out there for hours. And, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm glad he's doing this." I'm like, years can't handle it. But I got a 68 Shelby Mustang and it was like sweet, perfect body and everything. It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to speak for those people who have lots of stories to tell that you haven't told them, okay? And I'm going to put Zoe, George Sauer, and Dexter together. You know, Dexter, being an artist, didn't want to have any piece of metal go to waste. He always could do something with it. And George could never let a piece of wood lay in the woods wasted without being carved up into something. So several times George got me to go over to Dexter's place with my logging arch and pull these things out of the woods. One time, George said, Dexter's got this piece of cherry out there, you should do something with it. So I go out there, we pull it out, and then I have to negotiate with Zoe to make sure that I can make a BTU trade for the cherry being as valuable as my maple firewood. So Zoe was a real attention to detail. You know, being a glass artist, you have to be associated with that. Just a little story. This community is absolutely stunning. You people are beautiful. I'm so proud to live amongst you people, and I know I don't know you all, but I love you all.
I don't know, I wasn't planning on doing this, so I'm being pushed up here for my one opportunity to say, Dexter Bacon, oh my gosh, you're the dirt that we walked on, and I don't know how we're going to stand up anymore. He was at my wedding, at the Selwood Church. We used to go for brunch every weekend to, you know, hang out in the woods. The good times at the solstices, running up and down the hill in various stages of dress and undress. I don't have anything to say that you guys aren't probably already thinking, so I'm just going to say, Dexter, we love you. And we're so glad we've got as many memories and people to share them with as we do.
I didn't recognize you with your clothes on.
I'm going to try and wrap this up. Now, you've all heard, you know, the logo, Dexter's Way Through Life, New Guinea Airways, We Never Land. There's a corollary that you may not have heard. So Dexter told me this story. He goes, so these guys, you know, they're flying around New Guinea, and it's a very mountainous country, pretty remote. These people in this airplane, it crash lands in this remote valley, and their last radio transmission is situation desperate but not alarming. And I swear to God, I go, that's Dexter's place. That's what it is. The situation may be desperate, but it's not alarming. This picture here was a picture I took. Now, we all moved up here on the hill for various reasons at different times. And I'm not quite sure how Dexter ended up here, but I know what this place meant to him. You know, it was a place of safety, it was a place of security, and it was a place where he felt comfortable, and it was a place in which he could operate on his own terms. That's what it meant. And so one day, Dexter called me, and he said, George, you have to come down here. I said, okay. And I came down, he goes, there's these guys cutting my trees. I said, okay. And he said, we have to go over there and we have to document this because, you know, they can't do this. So we walked over there and he had a tape measure and I had a camera and I'm taking all these pictures. These are really nice Douglas fir trees. 18 inches, 22 inches, really fine timber. I'm going, yeah. And I'm thinking, and he goes, there's my property line. I said, well, you know, maybe. And I go home and I try to figure out, you know, I'm looking at the maps and I'm looking at surveys and I'm going, he's probably wrong. He's probably wrong. So I go, you know, back the next day. Dexter's at the bottom of the driveway. And he goes, and I think he knew he was in trouble. Because he goes, you know, because he'd been up there and the guys had been up there and he'd been up there, walked up there with his axe and he had had words with them and he had remonstrated with them and he had told them they couldn't do what they were doing. And they had said, okay, we're going to call the cops. And so he walked back and they did. And so I was down there and he goes, you know, they're going to claim I threatened them with this axe, but you don't need, you know, I didn't threaten them with the axe. You know, when you're walking through the woods, man, you never know. I always carry an axe, you know, I mean, an axe is what you need when you're hacking away at the branches and shit. I'm telling you, you can make up your own minds what may have occurred up there. So then I turn around, and this deputy sheriff, Multnomah County deputy sheriff car pulls up, and maybe a Portland police car pull up, and these guys are walking down the driveway.
Were you naked?
Yeah. And so they walk up and they say, are you Dexter Bacon? And I go, no, that's Dexter Bacon. And they go, oh, okay, whatever. And they have this conversation with Dexter and they say, you're going to have to go with us. We're arresting you. And so he walked up the driveway and he got in the car. And he drove away and I went, uh-oh. So, you know, the way the story goes is kind of anticlimactic because the next day he calls me, you know, I drive down to the Justice Center in downtown Portland, you know, it's about 11:30 and they let him out and I take him home.
Were you naked?
No. Not in downtown Portland. Not at the Justice Center. So, you know, they decided, obviously, you know, that they weren't going to, they were letting him go on his own recognizance. They didn't press charges. That was the end of that. But my point here is, Dexter cared about the land. He cared about his place. He cared about the environment. He cared about the trees. He cared about his security. And he had a very, you know, I mean, people say, well, you know, so how come 100 cars came down there for their final resting place? And I'm going, because they needed to. And because, you know, Dexter actually was a non-interventionist. He kind of let things happen. And I, you know, as many people have said here now, you know, we will miss him.
Yes.
We will miss him. Yes, we will.
Yes, we will.
Chicago, New York, Detroit, and it's on the same street. Your typical city involved in a typical daydream. Hang it up and see what tomorrow brings. Dallas, got a soft machine. Houston, too close to New Orleans. New York, got the ways and means, but just won't let you be. No. Most of the cats that you meet on the street think of true love. Most of the time they're sitting and crying at home. One of these days, then they better be going out of the door and down on the street all alone. Trucking like the doodah man once told me, you got to play your hand. Sometimes the cards ain't worth a dime if you don't lay 'em down. Sometimes the light's all shining on me. Other times I can barely see. Lately it occurs to me, what a long, strange trip it's been. What in the world ever became of Sweet Jane? She lost her sparkle, you know she isn't the same. Living on reds and vitamin C and cocaine. All a friend can say is, ain't it a shame? Trucking up to Buffalo, I've been thinking you got to mellow slow. It takes time to pick a place to go and just keep trucking. Sitting and staring out of the hotel window. Got a tip, they're gonna kick the door in again. I like to get some sleep before I travel, but if you got a warrant, I guess you're gonna come in. Busted down on Bourbon Street.